You can't command the markets. You can't dictate what price will do next. But you can command your process, your behavior, your consistency, your internal equilibrium. That's where everything begins to shift. The principle that made me a billionaire never promised a life without losses. That would defy reality. It meant that I never lost my anchor while experiencing them. The true damage never starts in the account balance. It begins in the mind. Every moment you abandon your framework, every moment you act from fear, hope, or excitement instead of rule, you hand over the only power that was ever yours. The market becomes your teacher, repeating the same lesson until you finally absorb it. The only path to enduring wealth is surrendering the fight against your own system. Accept it, trust it. Let it be the structure that shapes every decision. The moment you stop resisting your process, you stop unraveling emotionally. And when your emotions stop deteriorating, your actions become beautifully mechanical. Remember this: elite traders don't need to predict what comes next. They only need to know they will obey their rules when it arrives. That's strength, that's discipline, that's the edge that compounds for decades. Every outcome is system feedback. Every drawdown is the price of participation. Every signal, every trade is information refining your execution and deepening your confidence in principles rather than predictions. When you operate from that foundation, you've already won, because the game stops being about money and becomes about honoring your method. And the method-driven trader never truly fails. Most people spend their entire lives trying to outwit the market. They shape their strategies, perceptions, and emotions around the obsession with being right, believing that correctness equals control. But that obsession is precisely what ensures repeated defeat. The desire to be right does not exist in market reality. It exists only inside you, born from ego and illusion. The market is indifferent to brilliance. It doesn't care how many charts you've studied or how much conviction you possess. It simply moves as supply and demand shift endlessly. Your cleverness has no meaning unless you attach your identity to it. When people search for the perfect system, what they truly chase is the fantasy of eliminating uncertainty. They treat normal losses as indictments of their intelligence, as if the market were pointing out their inadequacy. But every losing phase in a robust system is simply an ordinary cycle, neutral until you interpret it emotionally. You never fail at trading in the sense of personal failure. What collapses is the illusion that outcomes are yours to control, the illusion that expertise determines results, the illusion that you should know the future. When those illusions shatter, the ego panics. That panic is what people call failure. To understand what actually creates wealth, you must detach from the belief that outcomes define skill. Most traders equate each win with competence and each loss with inadequacy. This constant emotional oscillation kills the consistency required for compounding. It distorts perception. You start filtering signals through the lens of fear or ego. And once you do that, your system loses all value because you're no longer following it. The first principle of lasting success is recognizing that your job is execution, not prediction. Perfect execution carries no inherent emotional weight until you attach one. A losing trade is not a mistake. It is probability unfolding exactly as statistics dictate. Maybe it teaches nothing about your edge. Maybe it simply exists within expected variance. Or maybe it proves that you executed flawlessly and the market behaved randomly as it does. Edge guarantees expectancy, not individual outcomes. Once you truly internalize this, drawdowns stop feeling like personal attacks. When you stop tying your identity to your equity curve, a profound freedom emerges. Freedom to execute with composure. Freedom to respond to signals without hesitation. Freedom to see reality clearly. Losing streaks lose their sting. They become signs that the system is breathing naturally. You begin to see that every drawdown contains the seed of future growth, a necessary contraction before expansion. The market becomes a partner, but only if you are humble enough to let it lead. Nature provides the metaphor. Trees don't question seasons. They don't panic in winter or boast in spring. They adapt effortlessly. The cycle is pure because expectation does not corrupt it. But as humans, we misinterpret losses as decay. We view drawdowns as flaws, and from that moment, we disrupt the very process capable of enriching us. Losses are woven into the fabric of wealth building. Even the greatest trend followers endure long periods of stagnation. What separates the wealthy from the wrecked is their acceptance that drawdown is part of the arrangement. To them, losing phases aren't punishments. They're statistically expected. They understand randomness in outcome distribution. They know that consistency in execution eventually brings probabilities to life across time. Amateurs interpret each loss as a sign of error. They tweak, abandon, or override their rules. That emotional intervention, not the system, causes long-term harm. The real failure doesn't come from the drawdown. It comes from the mind that refuses to withstand the drawdown without reacting. The market can't hurt you unless you violate your own structure. It's your thoughts about the results, not the results, that create suffering. If the rule says exit and you exit, nothing catastrophic has occurred. You paid the known cost of participation within a probabilistic edge. But if you tie your worth to that loss, the pain becomes intolerable, prompting system abandonment, inconsistency, chaos, and deeper confusion. Losses are not obstacles. They are the texture of your equity curve. They reveal whether your beliefs match reality. They expose whether your discipline can withstand normal variance. Each time you take a signal, you're expressing faith in your method. When the outcome disappoints your hopes, it's a chance to reaffirm that faith, not to defect. The trader who learns this becomes wealthier than all others because they stop fighting the system's demands. They conserve energy by relinquishing the need to control results and channel everything into flawless execution. Mastery appears the moment you stop judging your system for producing losses. When you accept that drawdowns are simply the toll for capturing long-term trends, you liberate yourself from the emotional spirals that ruin most traders. Consistency is only achievable when your emotional state is no longer tethered to equity swings. Imagine approaching every signal with identical focus, whether you're up or down for the month. That's what professionals do. They've trained their minds to operate in execution mode, calm, neutral, precise, accepting randomness as the architecture of markets. Once this is internalized, your perception of risk transforms. Risk stops being something to avoid. It becomes something to quantify and manage. The more emotionally comfortable you become with uncertainty, the more powerful you grow. The trader who fears drawdown executes poorly, hesitating, chasing, abandoning rules. The trader who embraces drawdown moves gracefully, taking signals, managing positions, and committing to the infinite long game. Most people assume the big breakthroughs come from superior entry logic or advanced algorithms, but sophistication is overrated. The real differentiator is emotional endurance, the ability to be wrong repeatedly before being right in a meaningful way. When you make peace with the grind, resistance disappears. And when resistance disappears, you sync with the deeper rhythm beneath the market's surface. Markets are information in motion. Your role is to respond, not predict. To accumulate wealth that lasts, you must stop grading yourself on short-term results. Equity will rise and fall. That's the reality of trend following. But emotional strength, psychological steadiness, and disciplined execution, those are the true drivers of compounding. Every time you take a losing signal without flinching, you strengthen trust. Every time you follow an exit despite emotional discomfort, you reinforce internal integrity. Every time you take the next signal after a drawdown, you accumulate resilience. Over the years, that inner infrastructure becomes financial growth. The next time drawdown arrives, pause. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this teaching me about commitment?" That reframing shifts everything. It turns discomfort into growth, uncertainty into understanding, and loss into calibration. Loss was never the issue. The issue was your inability to withstand discomfort while still honoring your structure. Once that shifts, fear dissolves, doubt fades. What remains is unwavering discipline, the ability to see markets clearly, act without distortion, and let no single outcome define you. When your behavior aligns with principle, there is no failure, only information, only data, only the compounded effect of thousands of disciplined executions. When you reach that state, you transcend the emotional traps that destroy most traders. You no longer fear drawdown, uncertainty, or being wrong. You realize drawdown is not the opposite of success. It is part of success. Every losing phase is simply the fee for positioning yourself to capture major trends. In this recognition, you understand the true nature of lasting wealth. Most traders believe success requires superior forecasting. They assume prediction will grant them control and safety. But that belief is the very poison that keeps them struggling. When your confidence depends on prediction, you've surrendered your stability to randomness. You will never extract certainty from a domain built on uncertainty. The market owes you nothing, no clarity, fairness, or reward. It behaves as it behaves. Your only real control lies in your adherence to your system. Following your system doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop needing the market to justify your emotional well-being. Most traders attach their entire emotional state to recent results. When equity rises, they feel brilliant. When it falls, they feel lost. This emotional volatility destroys execution and breeds desperate behavior. The only escape is to see outcomes as neutral expressions of probability. They define nothing. They simply represent the interplay between your method and current conditions. Your system is a lens. If you project emotion onto outcomes, you fog that lens. You see fantasy, not reality. But when you detach, everything clears. The market stops being adversarial. It simply is. Your job isn't control, it's alignment. Most traders believe emotional stability comes after they start winning more. But the truth is the reverse. Stability precedes success. True consistency begins the moment outcomes stop disrupting your state. Once no single trade can shake you, your execution becomes flawless. You follow your rules because you trust the long-term expectancy they represent. Every trade offers only two controllable elements, your preparation and your response to the signal. Everything else is probability. You can analyze perfectly, but outcomes will still follow statistical distribution. A 70% win rate still means 30% loss. If you can't emotionally accept that 30%, you'll never harvest the 70. When your emotions hinge on outcomes, interference arises. Fear of loss, fear of missing out, fear of being wrong. Fear breeds hesitation, erratic sizing, and abandonment of rules. Following a system isn't about becoming robotic, it's about becoming free. It's quiet confidence built on process instead of outcome. Executing a losing trade according to rule is still success. You acted with alignment, you honored probability, you stayed consistent. That is how wealth compounds. If you define success by behavior, not by profit and loss, you build an unbreakable foundation. But if you define success by monthly results, you collapse because results fluctuate while process can remain unshakable. Emotional attachment stems from expectation. The stronger your expectation, the more intense your emotional reaction when reality diverges. You can't control markets, but you can control expectation. Letting go restores clarity. You execute cleanly. No forcing, no grasping, no emotional distortion. That is trading in flow, present, neutral, and aligned with method. To reach that state, you must embrace uncertainty as the core structure of markets. Most fear it. But uncertainty is the essence of markets. Trying to eliminate it is insanity. Accepting it unlocks clarity. Noise disappears. The need for prediction dissolves. You act because your system instructs you, not because you crave validation. That mindset produces wealth. Every time you let results destabilize your commitment, you reinforce the belief that success depends on forces beyond your control. Over time, that belief exhausts you. You begin chasing markets, demanding confirmation, forcing trades. But markets validate no one. True validation comes from knowing you executed precisely as your method required, regardless of the outcome. That is real confidence. That is the mindset that separates billion-dollar thinking from break-even thinking. Emotional detachment is also an act of faith. Faith in your edge, your preparation, and your long-term resilience. You don't need to foresee the future. You only need to know you will follow every signal, manage every position, and execute without internal conflict. From that mindset comes true power. Not because you avoid losing, but because losing no longer destabilizes you. Your behavior becomes consistent because your psychology no longer fluctuates with short-term noise. Wealth begins compounding quietly. As detachment deepens, trading becomes less dramatic. No euphoria, no despair, no compulsive monitoring. It becomes straightforward, even boring. That is the paradox of mastery. The thrills vanish, but the wealth grows. Professionals don't seek stimulation, they seek expectancy. The real challenge is emotional training. You can grasp detachment intellectually, but your emotions won't comply until you experience it through real trades, real wins, real losses. You must condition yourself through repetition. Each time you endure a losing trade with composure, you rewire your nervous system. You prove to your subconscious that loss is not danger. That drawdown, when bounded by rules, is safe. Over time, this conditioning builds unshakable stability. From that stability, perception sharpens. You begin to see opportunities more clearly, not because you got smarter, but because fear no longer filters your vision. The market hasn't changed. You have. You stop projecting fear or greed, you simply perceive and respond. That clarity is your true edge. It's not in foreseeing the future, but in perceiving the present accurately. When you reach this level, trading stops being warfare. It becomes observation. You don't fight the market, you follow it. You don't try to dominate outcomes, you manage responses. You stop demanding certainty and start trusting probability. And as that trust deepens, your wealth stabilizes. You stop forcing trades, stop overtrading, stop chasing recoveries. You become steady because your inner world is steady. Detaching emotion from outcome is ultimately about reclaiming sovereignty. As long as your peace depends on the market, you are enslaved by randomness. But when your calm comes from honoring your system, nothing external can shake you. Wins and losses fade into background noise. You navigate markets with quiet assurance, fully aware that no single outcome defines you. This principle transcends trading. It applies to business, investment, relationships, everything of long-term value. The more you attach to outcomes, the more you suffer. The more you trust the process, the more you grow. Detachment is not losing emotion, it is gaining freedom. Freedom from reaction, from attachment, from the need for control. In that freedom, you find clarity. And in that clarity, you perform at your highest level, steady, consistent, fearless. That is the principle that built my wealth.